Okay, welcome to Recently Interesting.
Thank you.
So, today I have a topic that I don't know if you're going to care for.
Oh gosh.
But we'll see. I feel like last time you didn't love my topic. But...
You want to talk about Matthew McConaughey?
Well, maybe a little bit. I feel like I've noticed a theme recently in certain things. So it's not that there's one specific event, but a theme that I've noticed this past week. Which is toxic masculinity.
Oh gosh, okay.
Yeah. So first, what I want to know is, what does masculinity mean to you?
Masculinity?
Yeah. Or just masculine. What does masculine mean to you?
I feel like masculinity to me just means a male provider.
Okay.
That's about it.
So then what does toxic masculinity mean to you?
A chat. I don't know. I feel like toxic masculinity is more like I feel like someone who's masculine is someone who is just like I guess sort of in my mind sort of like a traditional male role model is probably a pretty masculine person. So someone who's comfortable in their own skin, protects the people that they care about, provides for the people that they care about, and, understands sacrifice, is humble. Yeah, it's controlled. But, so I feel like toxic masculinity, I feel like, is someone who has those traits, but inherently has a problem with women. Like, I feel like when you say toxic masculinity, it's usually people who are too much in those categories that I listed, and then additionally have an issue with women. And that could just be because maybe they had a bad relationship, and now it's like all the women are out to get him. Like, they don't trust him anymore, and it's just like, and so they're just very, they're overly assertive because they don't want to be pushed around. I don't know.
I was listening to quite a few different videos earlier this morning, in preparation for today, just trying to get different people's takes on toxic masculinity. Mm-hmm. And one person I thought said something very funny. They said toxic masculinity is what women who can't get laid call the men who they wish that they could sleep with.
Okay.
Which I thought was funny. But I don't necessarily agree. I mean, I maybe agree to an extent with that, but I mean,
ever since I've told you this, but ever since I watched all those drizzle videos, mm-hmm. my YouTube feed has just been flooded with, like, I would say,
Chad.
Dude, so much just like, I don't even know, like, male fanboy videos, pretty much. Yeah. Where it's just like a bunch
masculine videos.
It's just a bunch of dudes, like, hating on women, I guess.
Sure.
Would be the best way to describe it.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's like, okay, yes, I can see where you can poke fun at that.
Yeah.
Or like someone's just being dumb and you're just like, okay, yeah, that's silly. But then some of the commentary of these people is just like over the top. Like, you know, you'll watch like a funny video and you'll just be like, oh, haha, funny. Like, someone's just being dumb and the butt of the joke happens to be at the expense of some girl. But then like the commentator will just like just drill it hard and be like, and this is why you can't trust women. And I'm just like, dude, who hurt you? Like, chill out. Like,
and just there you took it too far.
Yeah, like sometimes things can just be funny because they're funny, but like it's not because like the whole world's out to get you, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I don't know. I feel like one or two people have had bad experiences, they can't get over it, and they just become toxic. And that, I feel like that's on both sides. Like, there's toxic guys and there's toxic girls. Like, girls can have bad experiences with boys too, and they don't trust boys anymore. And that's a lot of like the hardcore, like, feminista type of people that you see where they're just like, oh, I know men. And they're just like, yeah, you know that, like, the bottom half, that's a bad way to put it, but you know, like the bottom of the barrel type of guys, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, you've seen sort of the sludge of all men, and you think everyone's like that.
Yeah.
And so it's like, yeah, there's good people and there's bad people on both sides of everything. And even if you're on the good side, there could still be bad people there. You know what I mean? Like, even if you're on the quote-unquote good side, like...
What's the good side?
Like, if you're on, like, the righteous side of a war, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like World War II, you would assume the Allies are the good guys, right? They you know, some of them still did bad stuff, right?
Well, yeah, I remember learning about the fact that America bombed a civilian town in Germany when there was a factory that was building tanks right up the road, but they specifically bombed the civilians instead. And I'm like, ooh, that's hard to claim.
Well, I mean, look at Japan. We dropped 2 bombs on Japan.
You know, what was the name of that city though? Do you remember? I thought it started with an L. In Germany?
I thought it started with a D.
Dresden.
Yeah.
Was that it?
That's what I'm thinking, but I'm not sure.
I think it was Dresden.
But yeah, like, even police officers, like, you know, you would assume that those are all the good guys, but there's still bad cops out there.
Oh, yeah, know? I was, well...
And so it's just like, even when you're on the quote-unquote good side, there's still bad people.
Yeah, well, so then I would say...
And so it's like, and so that's why I say, like, in every category and on every side, there's good people and bad people. And so it's like...
Right.
You can't judge the entire group of anything based on only the bad people.
Right. So I'm not trying to judge the entire group, but what I'm saying is if you take the category of masculinity and you divvy it out between, okay, there's masculinity and there's toxic masculinity. At what point does something that's masculine go too far to where it falls into that toxic trait?
I feel like a good example of, like, good masculinity, I guess, if you could just call that, is shown in Lord of the Rings. And I feel like we've talked about this before.
Yeah, Aragorn,
yeah. I feel like
that's the best example of masculinity in all of literature. I mean, maybe besides like Jesus or something, but like in all of fiction, I would say he's the best example.
He is a very good example because, I mean, if you've just watched the movies, he's this pretty rugged guy who's fought in many wars, but he also has like a softer side. Like
he also sings
in the very last episode. I mean,
Incredibles.
if you haven't seen it, spoilers. Don't know why you slept on this one, but
I know.
he like
20 years since the movie's been out.
Yeah.
Like 100 years since.
But I mean, so he gets crowned king, and he's sort of like an outcast for the majority of the movies, or like chosen to be, right? He gets crowned king at the very end, and then he like sings a song and like sheds a tear, you know? And so it's just like, this is someone who is obviously like total hardcore in terms of the stereotypical masculine things of fighting and, you know, like strategy and all this stuff. But then he also has like a soft side, and he's someone who's comfortable like expressing his feelings in front of his entire kingdom, because he's like, yeah, remember that one time that I like fought everyone, like literally everyone? And he's like, so I can sing, whatever. Like, not that that's what his feelings were, but he was just comfortable in himself, you know?
Yeah.
And so I feel like that's a great example of like just someone who's comfortable, and they're not overbearing. They're humble.
Yeah.
Like even at the very end, like he's the king of like all of the humans, and then Frodo, who is the ring bearer, who didn't really fight in any wars. He was just sort of trying to get to the mountain. That was his goal. He was skirting around all the wars. But Frodo bows to the king, just showing his respect. And he was like, no, you won't bow to anyone. And then he bows to him.
Uh-huh.
And so it's just like, there's just so much depth into that, where it's just like, yeah, he's someone who's humble, you know? He's not like, oh, I got the crown.
Yeah.
Like, now everyone needs to like bow to me all the time, you know? And so it's just I feel like a very strong example of positive masculinity.
I do think that maybe humility is one of the key factors that separates masculinity from toxic masculinity. Because I'll give you some of the examples of what made me feel like this is almost a theme from the past week, right? So this past week, we watched Iron Claw. And watching the dad in that movie made me feel like, man, I would say that is toxic masculinity. And I don't necessarily believe in the toxic masculinity in the way when women are like, people are man-spreading, when it's like they're just sitting that way because they're more comfortable. They're not trying to sit that way to take up more space. Like, they just are trying to be comfortable. I would say that mansplaining, when people say that is definitely a thing. I think a lot of men do that, and maybe they don't realize that they explain things that it's like, yeah, I actually already knew everything you just said, but I hope you enjoyed telling it to me, I guess. But
The only thing I have to say to that is, then why'd you ask? Like,
no, oftentimes
people just walk up to you and start explaining things to you.
Yeah, I've definitely experienced that, of where a question was not asked, something is getting explained to me, and I actually already knew everything that is being said. That's
a weird situation. Okay.
It happens more often than you might think. Anyways, so this dad, though, in the movie, he has a dream about taking home the belt, right? He's not able to achieve it over the course of his career. But then he raises his sons to do that. And basically, over the course of their life, he pushes them so hard to be like men, you know, to be strong. That's what there's quite a few times that they repeat in the movie that their dad always told them when they were growing up that if they were the strongest and they were the toughest, then nothing could hurt them, basically.
Mm-hmm.
But even being as strong as they were physically strong, but the way that he raised them, mentally they weren't as strong as they were physically, and half of them commit suicide.
Yeah, I feel like it's you said a key part is humility. I think so. I feel like that may be the case, but I feel like it's more than just humility. I feel like it's like the sort of sort of all of the non-physical attributes, like being mentally resilient. I feel like needs to go hand in hand with strength. You know what I mean? Like someone could be physically strong and have a low mental resilience for things, and like you see in that movie, when things weren't going their way, it was just like they just didn't have the mental fortitude to overcome it. But I feel like the thing is, I feel like a lot of that isn't really mental fortitude. It's more just the fact that like they didn't want to disappoint their dad, and there was just like this precedence of like everyone needs to have the approval of their dad.
They were raised in a very authoritarian household, it seems like. It was yes, sir, and not even really no, sir. Pretty much just yes, sir, and that's it.
But
I think that...
But, I mean, that was also just, like... This was, like, 50 years ago, you know?
Okay, but so then something that's currently going on is... P. Diddy has been in the news because of that video that came out of him beating up Cassie in a hallway of a hotel.
I wouldn't call that toxic masculinity, though. That's just... abuse.
Yeah, but I would say being physically strong and being able to fight is a masculine trait because that's kind of a part of protecting. Mm-hmm. But when you take that strength and that ability to fight and turn it around on someone that you should protect, then I would say that's toxic masculinity. Because it's not feminine to physically fight.
Okay.
I would say that it's masculine.
All right. Sure. I would agree.
So I would say that was an example of toxic masculinity. Just from this past week.
Okay. I still wouldn't call that toxic masculinity. I feel like it's
but why? Abuse. Why not?
It's abuse.
Yeah.
Like... toxic masculinity. I guess I would never thought that to be that, because there's another word for it. It's abuse.
Yeah, but
like
let's say
if a guy's...
if you imagine it in the reverse, that she had been chasing him down the hallway, punching him, that would be abuse, but I wouldn't think that it was toxic, like that's toxic I don't know, that's not even toxic femininity.
Exactly. Like
that's just a woman being abusive. But I would consider it toxic masculinity for a man to do it because I do think that it's a masculine thing to do. Because if a guy was fighting...
But the thing is, I think of the word toxic.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just thinking too much into this. But whenever I think of the word toxic, I think of like something that's contagious, you know? Like something that...
Poison, I would say.
Yeah,
That
like
is how I think about it, but I wouldn't say contagious.
Something that can be transmitted, something that can be spread, you know? So
Okay.
that's what I think of when I think of toxic. And so seeing a guy beat up a girl, I don't think that is something that is something that people see and think, oh, well, if he could do it, I could do it, you know? And so, but I feel like
Right.
I would say toxic masculinity is the guy who's saying, it's okay to beat up a girl. I would say, sure, that's toxic masculinity because he believes that dominating some other person is acceptable when it's not. But the act of doing it isn't something that's like something that really spreads an idea. It's just like it's just abuse.
So to you, masculinity is not what you do and how you behave, but it's
Toxic masculinity is...
Well, that's what I was asking you before. Like, how would you define toxic masculinity? But you didn't. I don't know that you gave me a very specific answer.
I define masculinity.
Right.
But I feel like toxic masculinity, if I'm putting the two together, it's the spreading of false ideas of what masculinity is what I would say toxic masculinity is. And so, like I said, when I watched...
It's not the behavior of those false ideas?
I mean, behavior follows, but the toxicity of it is the fact that it's like a catchy idea that people are like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, mm-hmm. I should be allowed to beat up a girl. I should be allowed to lock him in the basement and just have 12 wives, you know, like weird crap that's just like, it's like, no, that's not actually something that is okay. You know, like women are not slaves. They're people. They're not subjugated to people. They are actual people. And so I feel like the spreading of this false idea that like men are this dominating race, I feel like is the toxicity. Like spreading the false ideas of masculinity, I feel like is what makes it toxic masculinity.
Where would you say that, because you talked about how things can become toxic between a man and a woman, but what would you say is the line where someone's masculinity is now toxic between a father and their son?
Well, I feel like I just...
If outside of like spreading a mentality, but maybe like what I'm wondering about is more the behavioral element where you feel like somebody's crossing a line into, I guess you could say, negative masculinity if you don't want to say toxic.
Well, I mean, so if I'm ever teaching, you know, a son something negative about how he's supposed to act as a man, I feel like that is by my own definition toxic masculinity.
So in my book that I've been reading Green Lights this past week by Matthew McConaughey, and he talks about his dad, and much like Iron Claw, the dynamic in his family was you've got the dad, the patriarch, and all the children in the family are boys. Mm-hmm. So in their family, 3 boys. But he describes how his dad, like kind of it was almost like a rite of passage in order to gain your dad's respect, for him to see you as a man, as an equal, was to fight. And
fight your dad?
Yeah, to fight. So, like, there was one time where his brother...
Matthew McConaughey had to fight his dad?
I'm trying to remember what his rite of passage was. But yeah, so a story that he talks about with his older brother is that his dad wanted him to go and do something. He didn't want to do it. And he told his dad no. And his dad's like, are you telling me no? Like, you know, kind of like starting to rage at him. And his dad was drunk. And he's like, I'm not going to do it. Just drop it and back off, basically. And his dad starts coming at him, trying to harm him. And so he ends up fighting his dad, and he ends up knocking his dad out. And his dad gets knocked out, and then whenever he wakes up, he's basically, I don't remember the exact quote, but basically he says something about like, I'm proud of you, son, and gets up and leaves. And then he said, like, from that day onward, they were equals. And I know, like, in my own family, like, my dad had a similar experience with his dad growing up, where it's like, you've got this dad who's kind of going around sort of, like, instigating fights with the sons to, like, are you going to take me on? Are you man enough to take me on? You know? And then eventually one day the kid does do it. They take on their dad. They fight their dad, best him. And then after that, it's like, all right, I'm not gonna try to aggravate you anymore.
Okay.
But would you say that I know you don't want to say toxic about that. Would you say that is negative masculinity? Or do you think that that's just a part of, like, boys being boys and fighting is a part of being masculine?
I never think it's a good idea to fight or cause fights within your own family, because I feel like there is between parent and child, I feel like there is a power dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to maintain a level of, like, respect there, where your kids respect you enough to do what you say, you know, whether that's go to bed,
Mm-hmm.
do your homework, go to school, you know. And so I feel like if you're always instigating them to fight, and then the day comes where they beat you up, it's like,
right.
Well, if that was the only level of respect they had for you is, well, they could beat me up, and then you finally beat them up, it's like, well, now there's no more power dynamic. There's no more do your homework, go to bed, go to school, because it's just like, well, I'll beat you up. You know what I mean? And it's just like...
Well, so in Matthew McConaughey's case, it sounded like, from what he said, that it wasn't necessarily a case of now his brother doesn't respect his dad because he knows that he can best the dad, but rather it was the opposite of before. Everybody respected the dad, but the dad did not respect them. And so the way that they earn their dad's respect is by leveling him. And then once they do, now it's like, okay, now you do have my respect. I know that you are a man, so I'm not going to tell you to do this, that, and whatever, because I know that you are a man and you do what you want. And so it's like, if you can take me on, then you can choose, you know, whatever you want to do. If you want to drink, you can drink. If you want to smoke, you can smoke. If you want to whatever, you can whatever. Because I know that you're a man, properly. Because only a man could beat me in a fight.
I mean, I feel like that sort of lowers the bar for what a man is. You know what I mean? Like, if your personal definition of a man is someone who could beat me up, I don't care who you are, that's a low bar.
Well, depending on what your abilities are.
I mean, sure, but like, you could be the best. You could be the best fighter, and someone could walk up and shoot you in the head, and it's just like, well, they beat you.
No, that's not what we're talking about, though. Like, let's imagine in your head Joe Rogan, and he's got a son who's 14 years old. You think that Joe Rogan's 14-year-old son could beat up Joe Rogan, could knock Joe Rogan out?
No.
I would bet certainly not. If he's 18, maybe he could. That's the point. Like, you know, like if he reaches a certain level where it's not only that he's grown enough, but he's also advanced enough that he could, then that's how you earn the respect.
Thing is, if, say I have a son who turns 18 and is like, I'm gonna fight you now, I'd be like,
yeah, but
why?
you don't fight, like, you're not somebody who would go around instigating fights with the kid throughout their life.
Yeah.
And that's the difference, because
But the thing is, for me, it's like, okay, like, you think you're a man, whatever that means to you, go take care of yourself.
That's what it is for you.
Yeah. Like, go take care of yourself.
It's like, ISO for you, it's financially independent.
Self-sustaining.
Yeah. Yeah.
Go take.
I mean, I think that that's a more... I don't know if I would say that that's a more apt definition of a man, but I would say of an adult, for sure.
Yeah.
I was listening to John Bernthal, who... Do you know who that is?
No.
He is the Punisher.
Oh.
And he was talking about toxic masculinity on a podcast. So I guess he has his own podcast, but in this case, he was being interviewed on Conan O'Brien's podcast, which, who knew that Conan O'Brien has a podcast on top of his TV show? But he was talking about, apparently, this is a topic that John Bernthal talks about on his podcast oftentimes. And so...
I mean, he's the Punisher, so it makes sense that he's talking about it.
Yeah, and so I would be interested to hear, like, maybe listen to one of his full podcasts and hear more of what he had to say about it, because this was just a clip that's like 8 minutes or 6 minutes long that I listened to of him chatting with Conan. But something that Conan said is that apparently people are often surprised when they meet John in person, because this persona that he has is very, you know, where's Rosa? Right?
Mm-hmm.
But then whenever they meet him in person, they're like, oh, he's like a really sweet guy, though. And they kind
He's
of
an
don't
actor.
expect him.
He's
I
an
know.
actor.
I know, but people still, like they kind of view him that way.
He's not really the Punisher.
Yeah.
It's like meeting Wolverine, and it's just like, where's your claws? It's like, I'm not actually Wolverine.
Yeah. So, something that he talked about... Okay, so he talked about balance and masculinity, basically, and he gave the example of samurai, and he was saying how samurai would do, obviously, very masculine, fighting, training, like strength training, all that kind of stuff, but also they would practice arts such as calligraphy and dance, and how for them they felt like that was something that kind of balanced them out, so that they were masculine, but they weren't over the top, I guess. Like, they had something calmer, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of reminding me of what you had said earlier. But then the other thing that he talked... Oh, yeah, he said that something about where he would say that something crosses over into toxic masculinity is like a my way or the highway mentality, like with men who run their households like that.
Dominating, yeah.
That was something that I noticed also. I felt like specifically with Iron Claw, it seemed to me that it becomes toxic when it gets to a point where somebody, it's not just like, I'm the head of the household, but it's blindly controlling. Like, I'm going to control my kids and what they do with their lives. no matter what anybody says.
The thing is, the reason that I wouldn't describe that as toxic masculinity is because there could be a single mom who feels the exact same way, but you wouldn't say that woman is a prime example of toxic masculinity.
For being controlling. That's true.
Yeah, it's like...
That's true.
It's like there could be a helicopter parent who's a single mom, but you wouldn't be like, oh, she suffers from toxic masculinity. It's like, no, she's just a helicopter. You would call her controlling or a helicopter parent, you know? And so I would still fall back to my personal definition of just spreading false ideas of masculinity is more what's toxic than actually any sort of actions, because I feel like actions could be done by guys or girls, and those actions have words to describe themselves. Like if a guy is beating up his girlfriend, I wouldn't call that toxic masculinity. I would call it abuse, because if the girl was beating up her boyfriend, I wouldn't call that toxic masculinity or toxic femininity. It would just be abuse, you know?
Yeah, but girls can be masculine, I think.
I'm not saying they can't, but I'm just saying there's a word for that. Like if a woman was spreading false ideas about what masculinity is, yeah, that's toxic masculinity.
So you think that a girl can have toxic masculinity?
I think anyone can spread false ideas of what a man should be. And that's not...
Yeah.
And that is the toxicity of it. Because then there's people who believe that that's what a man should be, and then that's what they aspire to be, and then you have all these people with like this skewed perception of like being a man.
Okay.
And they're unbalanced, and yeah, they're all messed up.
So, are you familiar with the term beta male?
Yeah.
So, would you say that women who encourage men to be beta males are those women have toxic masculinity?
Oh gosh. What do you mean encourage? Like what?
Like, let's say that they have a podcast or YouTube or whatever, you know, they're sharing their opinions on the internet. And these opinions that they're sharing is things like, don't open the door for a woman. She can do that herself. Men shouldn't pay on dates. Women have their own money and they can pay for themselves. You don't need to be opening your door. You don't need to be paying for the date. You don't need to, you know, whatever kind of things that men might be inclined to do or taught to do. Is that toxic masculinity?
I feel like that's on a different track. I feel like those actions of being are more on sort of a chivalry sort of track.
Some people seem to be offended.
Right.
But
the thing is, there's a difference between someone, like, okay, say I go on a date with someone, and I open the door for them, and they're like...
That would be me.
Yeah. But say you're like, you don't have to open doors for me, I can do that myself.
Uh-huh.
I'm probably not going to continue opening doors for you. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I'm going to be like, okay, fine. Open your own door. Like, I don't care. Mm-hmm. I was just being polite.
Yeah.
You know? And so I feel like chivalry, nowadays is just another word to describe men, like common things men do to be polite. And I feel like if there's a woman out there that doesn't want a man to follow common male polite practices, mm-hmm. that varies on a case-by-case basis. Some girls do like things and other girls don't, you know?
But if I, like, for example, if I was going over to young men who we might know and telling them, hey, when you, not like I'm the girl and I'm on the date and the guy opened the door for me, but I'm telling somebody else, don't you dare open a car door for a girl, okay? She's an adult, not a child. She doesn't need it. she can do that herself. Am I being toxically masculine?
I wouldn't say that that's toxic masculinity because it's not an attack on masculinity. It's an attack on someone's politeness.
Chivalry?
Yeah. So you're just making them less polite. Like, it's like if you went to someone and said, stop saying please and thank you. No one likes that. It's like, that's not an attack.
Nobody needs to be thanked.
Yeah, like, that's not an attack.
Okay, so then you said that women can be. So, like, could you give me an example of a woman being toxically masculine then?
Yeah, so I guess an example of like a girl being toxic of a girl doing toxic masculinity. I mean, I've seen videos where, like, a girl will say just things about male behavior that are, like, the only thing you need to do, you know? And I feel like that's not, like, they'll give, like, their key points of, like, here is what you need to be a man, and they'll be like, you need to make money and...
The drizzle, or the sprinkle list, huh?
Exactly. Like, you need to have a bunch of money and go to the gym. And it's just like, and drive a Lamborghini. And it's like, yeah, those are cool, but...
Your take. There you go.
Yeah, but that's not...
Join the harem.
That's not, I guess, in my opinion, what the pinnacle of masculinity is.
But those women are they're exhibiting toxic masculinity by...
They're spreading toxic
By
masculinity.
praising false masculinity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I'm kind of... We had to pause for a second there, so I'm kind of.
I can ask you a question. We kind of shift gears a little bit because earlier you're talking about chivalry and talking about, you know, if a guy opens the door, if a guy, you know, pays for the date. Do you have a belief who should pay for the date?
Yeah, I mean, I think the guy should pay for the date. I feel like it should be whoever asks should pay for it. Mm-hmm. So if a girl came up to me and said, you want to go on a date? I feel like technically, yeah, maybe they should pay for it. But I probably still would, just because, I don't know. I feel like that's what I do. Like, I was about to say, I feel like I would because I'm a guy, but that's not really a productive thing to add to this conversation. But yeah, like, I don't know, I just feel like I would because that's just how I am and what I think is right. But I feel like, yeah, if whoever asks should probably be the one paying. There was only one time in my life that I didn't pay for a date because it was weird. It was like a group blind date. So, like...
Were you going to a theme park or something?
No.
I feel like you told me before that you went to a theme park and you didn't pay. Like, you paid for yourself.
Yeah, I mean, that date never actually happened, but yeah.
Oh.
Like, I had plans to go to, like, a theme park with a girl.
Mm-hmm.
But, there was, like, a whole group of us going, and most of us fell through. Most of the people fell through.
So it was not a date.
Yeah. But yeah, it was a group blind date. So, like, it was a group of guys and a group of girls that all met up, and it was just like, who's my date?
Okay, so you went on a group blind date. I'm wondering if we've ever talked about this before.
I guess it wasn't really a group. It was a blind double date. So there's
double
me
date.
and my friend
Uh-huh.
who were set up by a third friend to
With
take
two
out
girls.
these other two girls that he knew.
And did
And
you guys
he
assign? Were you assigned which girl, or it's like
No.
you show up on the date and it's like whichever one you prefer is your date?
Yeah.
Not like you're with Chelsea and you're with Hannah.
Yeah, no. There was no assigning. We just sort of showed up and were like
Strange.
it was super awkward.
You never met before?
Never met, and like the guy who set it up
Wasn't there.
was very like, I don't know, he just wasn't very observant, and so he was like off doing his other things, and me and my buddy
He was there though?
Yeah. Cause like he had asked a girl to go, and like another, like it was like a.
Was it a double? I'm getting so lost in the story. I'm getting so confused.
It's because it was that weird. All right. So I mean, there was a bunch of guys, right?
Yeah.
I'll just tell you the entire story. It's just gonna get confusing. So there was like maybe 7 guys, myself and my buddy included, who got this blind hookup. All of which, so 5 of the guys had like dates to this haunted maze that we were all gonna go to together.
Okay.
And of course they're like, dude, you guys should come too. And we're like, you guys are all going with dates. Like, we're not gonna go and hold each other's hand. Like, that's weird. Like, like you're all paired up and then it's just me and this guy. And it's like, we're not gonna go and like just like hold our hands through this maze. Like, we just thought it was weird. We're like, we're not gonna go. And then one of the guys is like, all right. I know 2 girls who want to go to this thing too. I'll invite them and you 2 can go with them. And we're like, okay.
You're like, I'm not going to hold the hand of a girl that I've never met until 5 minutes ago either.
Right. But it was like something to just like
balance the numbers,
make it make sense, make us go, I guess. I don't know. And so we show up, and so he's obviously occupied with his date along with everyone else. And then these 2 other girls show up and we're like, sorry. And we weren't even told their names. Like, so we just had to go and be like, do you know so-and-so? And they're like, yeah, do you? And we're like,
didn't even introduce you?
We're like, yeah. And we're like, okay, cool. I think we're here for each other. And they're like, yep. And we're like, okay. And I think they expected us to be more like datey, you know, like buy their tickets and like, I don't know, be more datey.
Oh, were they pissed that you didn't buy their tickets?
Maybe, but we were just like, all right, cool. Like, you're here, we're here. Nice. Like, let's go.
Did you hold their hands in the maze?
No. It was still weird because like they were friends and me and my buddy were friends.
And you're like, so I guess we will just hold hands, me and my bro.
Yeah. And so I'm like, this
funny.
didn't make anything better.
So
yeah, that was the only actual date I feel like I've been on where I did not pay for my date.
I would say, have you ever been on a blind date outside of that?
No. I feel like that was my first and only blind date experience because I'm like, this is terrible.
Like, absolutely never again.
Absolutely terrible.
I'm trying to think if I've ever been on a blind date, and I think, oh, your mom texted me. I think that I have never been on a blind date. I did have a friend who was planning to set me up on a blind date, and then I started dating you. So then it never happened.
Gosh, I have to think now.
But I
feel like I probably have been set up on a blind date.
If I've ever
I need to really think.
I've gone on a date as a favor before of like where it was that kind of situation where there was a double date planned, and my friend had a specific guy who she had a big crush on, and she wanted me to go, like, his friend's date fell through, the girl fell through, and so I was actually I was swimming, and she knew where I was, and she just shows up at the place where I'm swimming, and is like, please come on a date with me, and I'm like, what? And she's like, please come on the date, like, we need another girl.
Because the other guy's date fell through?
Yeah. So, yeah, his girl fell through, and I'm not surprised because this was actually a guy who I was familiar with, like, I knew him, and he was horrible, he was so annoying. And I'm like, I bet that other girl didn't want to go on a date with you, just like how I don't want to go on a date with you either. I'm swimming with my friends, having a good time, and you want me to get out of this pool so I can go on a date with this guy who sucks? Ugh. But, like, this is my really good friend, and she really, really liked this guy that she was going out with. So I'm like, I'll do it for you. So I went, and I remember the date so well because we went to this burger restaurant, and he ordered this, like, half-pound burger or whatever, and he was eating it, and it was super greasy, and I remember him just eating it like a total slob, and the grease was running down his arms and dripping off of his elbows, and I was sitting across the table looking at you like, man, my friend's lucky I'm so nice. He was so annoying. But I did it for her. But other than that, I will say and he paid on that date. That's the closest thing, but I'm saying it wasn't a blind date. I did know who he was. But I don't think I've ever gotten set up on a date where I had no clue who they were beforehand. But it does sound kind of like a little adventure. But I've never paid.
It's definitely an adventure, but it's not a fun adventure.
I've
because
never.
It's like, imagine all the people in the world that you pass on the street every single day, and you're just like,
it could be anyone.
Exactly. It's like,
yeah.
How many people do you walk by in a day, and how many do you think, that person looks interesting, I'd love to go on a date with them? But you also pass like 1,000 other people that you were not interested in. So it's like the chances that it's one person out of 1,000 is slim.
My friend who did want to set me up, though, I did trust his judgment. That I felt like, if you think that this is somebody, it depends on the judgment of the person.
Yeah.
Because that friend that I had, if he was going to set me up with somebody, I felt like, I trust you that you'll set me up with somebody who is suitable, not somebody who's like one of the thousands that I pass on the street. Yeah. But I would say I have never paid on a date, and yet also I would say that if I paid for myself, I did not consider it a date. It's just like, oh, we're hanging out then. Because if they didn't pay, then it's like, all right, so you want to be friends, gotcha. That was what it read in my mind as.
Yeah.
Because I felt like if he was interested, then he would have paid.
He would have paid money.
Yeah, well, sure. Because, I mean...
So how does this relate to your toxic masculinity? I feel like we're just sidebarred on this.
Yeah, we are in a sidebar because we got off track before. Oh, I was just wondering because before you were talking about chivalry, and when you were talking about chivalry, you talked about who pays on a date, and so I was just wondering what your official stance was on the topic about who pays on a date. But
whoever asks is my official topic. My official stance is, yeah, if I'm going on a date with a girl, I will most likely pay.
Yeah, I would say it could be whoever asks, but the girl shouldn't ask. Only the guy should ask, and only the guy should pay.
Yeah, but
and
like
the girl,
I've been to like a Sadie Hawkins dance, where the girls ask the guy.
Always a surprise.
Always, oh gosh.
Yeah, see, I've never been to a Sadie. Maybe it's because, in Texas, they don't do that. They don't do Sadie Hawkins. Because it's like, oh, this gender confusion, wanting girls to ask out boys. We're not doing it! There was no Sadie Hawkins at all.
Even for the Sadie Hawkins, it was, she asked me, she paid for, like, the ticket to the dance, but we went out to dinner, and I still, like, bought her dinner. And she's like, I'm supposed to be paying for you. And I'm like, no, dude, you already asked. Like, let me buy you dinner.
I didn't realize... The only way that I'd ever even heard of Sadie Hawkins was that song. Until I met you, and then you talked about going to Sadie Hawkins when you were a teenager. And I was like, that's what... Like, that actually happens in our modern society. You guys have dances where the girls are assigned to ask the boys?
Yes, modern society.
Yeah,
that's
not modern, that's liberal society. Because in Texas, the modern society in Texas is the boys will ask the girls, thank you very much.
That's not modern, that's traditional society.
Yeah, but it's happening in modern day. My childhood, your childhood, same timeline.
Yes, but still, one's traditional, one's modern.
It's traditional versus a very liberal view of what the gender roles are, I suppose.
Yeah.
But yeah, I never asked a guy out. Never paid.
Yeah.
I don't think a girl should. I think it's ill-advised.
Okay. Anyway,
Do you want to talk more about that?
Back to the masculinity topic.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. I don't know if you said this or not, but back on the whole Punisher thing, you had mentioned at one point in that interview that he was talking about self-protection.
Okay, yeah, so I'll recap this because I think this is what got cut out. He was talking about how he has 2 sons, and for him, what he feels like is a part of positive masculinity is that he teaches his sons to protect themselves, and his sons take martial arts classes. And then he said, but also, I do think that it's important for my daughter to be able to protect herself, and I think he said that his daughter takes self-defense classes. But in my opinion, I felt like, okay, well, this is what you're saying is positive masculinity, but then you're saying that your daughter needs it too. So how is that masculine if you think that both need to do it? But then I remember actually my point to that was that I would say, in my opinion, I think that protecting does fall within the masculine umbrella, but I think that it's something that women should be competent in, but that they don't need to necessarily pursue. Like, only pursue it to a level of competence and maybe not further than that. Whereas for men, it's like, yeah, not only be competent, but also pursue that. So for a man to do MMA, that's more aggressive, like you're learning to fight. But for a woman, it's like maybe self-defense is enough for you. Does that make sense?
I mean, yes, it makes sense. The thing that I think about is I watched this one clip and I thought it was really funny. It was totally a guy just like rage baiting a little bit, but essentially what he said was he's like, I think fighting is actually super gay. And then they're just like... 'Cause
you're rolling around on the floor with your crotch up in somebody's face.
Yeah, so he's like... And they're just like, what? And he was talking to people who are like fighters, and they're just like, what are you talking about? He's like, hear me out. He's like, I think bar fights, he's like, super gay. He's like, because you go to a bar to pick up girls. And he's like, but if you go to a bar to get into a fight, and he's just like, so you're telling me you go to a bar surrounded by girls who may also be trying to get picked up, and all you can think about is that guy in the corner, and think about, yeah, I can overpower him. Yeah, I want to take him outside. I want to be alone with him. And it's just like, he just kept going into it and into it. And I'm like, okay, that's funny. But to more your point of what you were saying is, I feel like one, we live in a day and age now where women can, I think, can do whatever they want. Not that they, I guess in my opinion, not that, not in my opinion, not that they should. Like, anyone can do whatever they want. Not that you should, but you can.
Mm-hmm.
And not that I have a problem with you doing things that I don't think you should do, but anyway. So, I guess what I'm trying to say is, I feel like when it comes to the whole protect and provide, you know, when people talk about masculinity as protecting and providing, they often go into protecting as like you gotta know how to like grapple and box and all this stuff. And in my mind, what I think of when it comes to like protecting is more than ability, but willingness to step in front of danger to protect your wife and kids and stuff, you know? So like, if there was a home invasion, I wouldn't be sending you to like go take out the bad guy. Mm-hmm. Or like, if there was a war and we were being invaded, I wouldn't send you or the kids to go fight the war. I'd be like, that's my responsibility to go out to fight so that you don't have to, you know? Mm-hmm. Not that women shouldn't be in the military or couldn't be in the military, but I think it is a man's job to provide that service. Yeah. Yeah. That's all.
All right. I think that's good. I think that's it for the day.
What do you mean? What have we concluded?
You want me to wrap it up?
Yeah. What are our lessons learned? What have we gained here from this discussion?
What I gained is that a key point for masculinity to not be what I would call toxic, but you would call negative, is humility. I think that if you could be humble in the way in which you protect and provide, you'll probably be alright. What about you?
I think to be a quote unquote man is multifaceted. I think it covers a lot of bases. Like, to be a woman is, I feel like, also multifaceted. You know, and so...
I think it's so multifaceted.
Well, like...
Just...
Like...
It's just so transgender.
Yeah, I get it. But, like, to be masculine or to be a feminine person, I feel like, is... Like... It doesn't boil down to, like, one thing. It's like, it's inner strength, it's outer strength, it's humility, dependability, politeness, kindness. Like, there's a lot of things that I feel like make a person a good person and make a man a good man.
I feel like those characteristics, though, are just... That's just adjectives of, like, any decent person, though. Not masculine or feminine specific.
Yeah. I feel like it's what are those, like, Venn diagrams? Two circles, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I feel like there's crossover where, yeah, both people need to be kind, whether you're a man or a woman. But I feel like to be kind is both a masculine and a feminine trait. Yeah, so I guess my takeaway is toxic masculinity is the spreading of false narratives about what it is to be a man, in my opinion. And to be a man is to be like Aragon from Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. That's the best takeaway, really. If you want to be positively masculine, do a deep dive study on Aragorn and model that. You'd be just fine.
Yeah, go slay some orcs. And
kill a bunch of bad guys. Sing a song, shed a tear.
Yeah, that's fine.
Balance in all. No, but I do really think that Aragorn is the, like I said before,
a good example.
In all of fiction, I think he's the best example of masculinity.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah. Yep. I mean, I guess I was going to say one more, but I don't know if... I haven't done enough research into this myself to know if it's true. But I heard, and if this is true, I feel like this is also a good example of masculinity.
Okay.
But everyone knows Chuck Norris. Everyone's heard the Chuck Norris jokes, right? And I feel like he's seen as a very, like, macho, masculine guy.
Mm-hmm.
Something that I heard about him was people were like, you know, like, how come Chuck Norris didn't have, like, a bigger career than he did? Because he was, like, doing well. He was very, like, macho. Like, he could have had a career like a... gosh, the guy who plays Rocky or the Terminator, or, you know, like, he could have...
Oh, Sylvester Stallone
or Arnold Schwarzenegger. Like, he could have had a career like them because he was, like, very macho like them in those types of movies.
Okay.
And I heard, again, I don't know if this is true, but if it is, great example, is that when his career was sort of, like, booming and getting bigger, his wife ended up getting sick. And so he turned down a lot of movie roles so that he could stay at home and take care of his wife.
Nice.
And, you know, they're still married. And I was like, wow. Yeah, that is, if that's true, that's fantastic. And also a great example of, like, being a man. Like, he's, one, very macho guy, but two, also cares about...
Knows what's important.
Yeah. He has principles and morals and feelings.
I like that.
Yeah. It's always good to end a video on Chuck Norris. And Lord of the Rings. Alright, sorry. That's all I got.
I don't want to apologize. It's good. Alright. Till next week.
Bye.
Bye-bye.